All right, so for YouTube, you were talking about membership to a site. What did you mean?
Well, it's like talking about the escapist. They're trying to drive this model of having a membership to, I guess, get videos early, and it's almost like they're implementing their own Patreon in a way. They're like trying to. It's like we want to have the benefits of like what Patreon generally provides a lot of creators, but they also don't want to have to use a separate platform. They kind of want to roll it all up into their own thing, which I can respect that. I mean, it makes sense if you don't want to have to like pay money to someone else just to achieve something that seems fairly simple, especially if given that they're just like a content provider network kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we're coming through this new phase of YouTube where YouTube has started flexing their power on demonetizing things. And you had mentioned that Game Grumps at one point censored kills in Alien Isolation because they were so worried that YouTube could demonetize it. And you're seeing so many people worried about now if they were used to popping out a video and getting $100 or $300 for it, and now you're at such a risk. And YouTube has had a pretty steady growth. And I think it's felt like a pretty sure thing for the people using it. Now it feels like we're getting to this territory where I don't think you can count on it. There's a musician I was watching, he was doing a Q&A, and he was talking about how he would never rely on it fully, even though it has made him a bunch of money and paid for his like apartment in New York. But he's at the point where he sees the volatility of it. And I think it does kind of come down to that question of like, what are people willing to pay since YouTube basically is free with some ads?
Oh, I mean, that is interesting, and they did have their premium version as well too. So I mean, they had YouTube Red. They
Right.
still have that, I guess. But
I
and
now
that's how much is that per month? Even it's like $7 or $8. It's whatever includes Google Music, I think.
I looked into it at one point because I thought if I could pay somebody at one point, it said something like $2 a month, $5 a month, and you don't have ads. I would pay for no ads. I would pay to be able to download the YouTube videos, and I would pay that if on my phone I could turn the screen off and I could have it play. I would pay for all those things, and then every time I look into it, I realize this doesn't feel worth it. It's one of those things like, okay, so right now YouTube Premium, which says not available, is $12 a month, and it asked me why can't I sign up for Premium? So maybe I don't know, maybe it's not available in Canada or something.
Yeah, I mean, even then, it's like I was just thinking with what you said. It's like even more vulnerable to that whole fragmentation issue that you get with subscribing to things like Netflix and Prime and Hulu and whoever else. It's just like are you sure all of the stuff that you want ad free is going to be coming from YouTube guaranteed? I mean, it's a pretty big platform. Don't get me wrong, but like you've got others. I mean, like the Escapist itself. Like you're going to have others that sort of form, and I mean, I wonder how many are going to. Maybe we're starting to see a trend of just people forming their own networks. It's just I don't know how well it's going to take off if you have to pay $5 to like 10 different content networks in order to actually read what you want.
Dude, I had this big moment yesterday where we were watching TV. A new episode of a season for a show Stella wants to watch is on. So we watch it, and then she goes, I want to watch the rest of it. So I go, and it says, oh, we have to add a channel on. So this is through Amazon Prime. You pay... So with your Amazon Prime subscription, you get a certain amount of video, and then they have these extra add-ons. And sometimes they're like $5, and you have access to a whole bunch of really old MGM movies. Like if I want to watch David Lynch stuff or like Hitchcock, I usually have to subscribe to one of those. If you want to watch reality TV, they'll charge you sometimes like $8 or $12 for, I think it's called Hayu, Hayu, and that gives you a lot of different reality TV. This one is where I felt like we're right back to cable television, because if we wanted to watch this season, it was something like $15 or $16, and you got 10 different channels, or maybe 12 different channels, and like none of them have anything to do with what you actually want. So it's this is the reason people were first trying to cut the cord back 15 years ago, because you thought, I don't want to pay another $30 on my cable tier to get one channel. And we've kind of had this sort of like, I mean, for a while Netflix had everything. Now everyone's piled on, and now but it hasn't felt that bad where it's $8 to Netflix, less than $10 to Disney, less than $10 a month to Amazon. But now that this one where they want to get another $16 just to watch one season of a show, and guess what, we signed up for it, and then it said, oh, these are unavailable. It's actually not, those episodes aren't out right now.
Oh my god. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, I don't know. I find it's generally easier for me to justify Prime, even though it's funny. It's like I don't even know if I consciously think about whether it's a good value add for me sometimes. Like I don't have it written down like how much I'm saving from using Prime, especially with Amazon's like I mean just the merchant side of things with all of the like it's like I saw somebody describe it as like Alibaba, the American branch or whatever. Because like it's all of this made in China stuff that's like knockoff junk that gets resold and it just you have to wade through so much of it. And so it's like I don't know, it's hard to know whether or not I'm actually getting my money's worth. But at least some of the content I've seen on Amazon does seem to be pretty good, the original stuff.
Oh,
But
the
yeah, I always
videos?
see there's like the cable provider stuff too, and it's like, man, I mean, I hate having everything locked down under such a complicated like web of ownership, you know?
So I guess it comes down to why is it so tough for people to host their own stuff? Why can't I go to a game publisher's website and pay them $5, $10, $20, $30 and directly buy it, sort of like Bandcamp with music? Why can't I go to the westwing.com and download it off them? I guess they're putting the money up to somebody else is putting the money up to have the show produced so that they're going to have the broadcast rights. I think a lot of it is sort of a holdover for how TV was done network television, and you're seeing sort of half of that network television stuff sticking around as they're trying to figure out how are we going to get everybody to pay for all this content now. And it seems like as the technology jumps ahead, the consumer is doing really well because you're able to get so much. Like, remember how easy it was to get everything for free? And you still can, but then they've caught up and realized, okay, we're not going to try and force people to just watch on TV, although some cable networks are still doing that. But they're figuring out a way to get it back to how it is. Like, I mean, even like say 5 years ago, advertising on the internet was far less intrusive than it is now. I mean, now it's like I was going on a site today, and the top third of the screen was a big giant ad I couldn't get rid of.
It was really funny. I was actually reading something about this. I think it was like a month ago or something, and it was just. It's talking about this idea. I think there was a book some guy published about it where he was talking about essentially it's like they don't really even know whether like how do you verify whether an ad actually worked? How do you verify if you put out like several ads too on several different sites? Like how does that stuff actually get accounted for when it comes to purchases? I mean, how do you know what you're doing is actually increasing sales? Sometimes it seemed like it was like there's occasionally places where you can figure that kind of thing out. But otherwise it's like you really can't connect buyer intent and when they saw an ad or whether they even saw an ad.
Well, yeah, I mean, advertising, you can measure things like click-through, and you hear it with podcasts where people say, use the promo code whatever and you get your 10% off. And that's a way for them to track which one of their sponsors is giving them the money and who's clicking through. But a lot of advertising has to come from just seeing it. Like, how effective was Raid Shadow Legends or whatever that thing is? Because every gamer saw that same bloody ad on YouTube, and we were all like clicking away from it as fast as possible, but they started every ad so effectively that I know what that is. I have no idea if it is good or is bad or who makes it, if it's like Chinese junk or what, but it's effective. And that's with nobody clicking through and buying anything, like not even spending a penny on it. But the brand recognition is huge.
It's actually the funny thing for me is like when you see the promos, like the actual sponsors on YouTube videos, sometimes, and this is kind of rare, but you'll see they actually get the YouTuber themselves actually timestamps when the ad begins and ends. And I'm just like, great, I'm just going to skip right to the end.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's very rare. That takes their own, like, of their own volition. They have to, like, put in the descriptions, like, the little timestamps for marking, you know.
Well, I think when they add a little jingle, like I know Giant Bomb would do this, they'd have a jingle and you'd hear two of them kind of improv their way through an ad. And that's very helpful for somebody listening on a podcast. You just like skip. And then as soon as there's no more background noise, you can figure it out, which if I was the advertiser, I wouldn't be happy that they're doing that. But as a listener, you really appreciate it. And then I don't know. It comes down to like, do you feel like you should be supporting them in a way by listening to an ad? But then there's the Banksy side of it where, he says you don't owe anything to these advertisers and, how dare they be advertising in your space? And when you really think about it, I mean, look around any room you're in or any place you are and very quickly count up how many brands you can see. Like just in front of me, I see Behringer, DBX, YouTube, Samsung, LG, Rode, and that Roland. That's not even, I mean, I am sitting in front of like so many electronics, but anywhere you are, like even if you're outside, you're going to see the name of a shovel or a car or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've got like 6 things in front of me and I've got my little like sound tent around me. So
yeah,
that says a lot.
Yeah. And I kind of like that idea of going out and like, if I was ever going to graffiti something or destroy something, it would be advertising. Because I was driving downtown Toronto at night and there was a truck in front of me that had the most like blaringly bright, blinding LED lights that were advertising something in the back of the truck. And it reminded me of, if you've ever been to Mexico, they'll have cars and trucks that drive around and they have these horrible megaphone speakers on them that are just like blasting out the radio and advertisements. And it's so obnoxious. But there's just something about Mexican culture where noise is much more tolerated. Everything's louder and it doesn't bother people. Where I think I'm more like Northern European, like I want to be quiet and in the cold. So any of that stuff really offends me, having to see it or hear it. It's like it's taking your brain space, it's taking your concentration, and it's trying to program you in a certain way.
Funny enough, Japan actually has almost both at once, because they have, during the political season, they'll have like these little vans or trucks that go by with those kind of speakers on there where they're just like, they're basically just blaring out, vote for so-and-so. But at the same time, they also really value silence, and they get mad if, you're making a lot of noise or something, like, except it's just like, there's just exceptions tossed throughout there. I just thought that was a funny little anecdote.
I can't believe that they would do that. I think they would bring something out that would be very peaceful, like a mobile bonsai garden, and it would have you could go up and you could take a beautiful tiny hand folded card and you'd unfold it and it would say,
like a
please
origami crane.
Yeah, please enjoy our political ad at your own leisure. Then
it's a little bit too much like Simpsons Japan or something.
Oh, I mean, isn't it amazing how many things The Simpsons predicts? They do tend to have just done so many things that they come out, but I was just watching that one where, what is it, like Homer coughs into the box? No, somebody in Asia coughs into a box, Japan, everybody gets sick. I think. Yeah, that's, YouTube is, I was looking for some Xbox information, and I went on YouTube and I thought, where am I going to find a review? And now that I'm 36, when I was younger, and I thought, IGN and GameSpot, they were great places to get information because there wasn't so much, but it's like, I ended up settling on a 26-minute review of the Xbox Series X by ACG Gamer. And I put it on 1.75 speed. And I could... Two times was just a little too fast, but 1.75 I could get all his tips. And he did such a good job. It was just so thorough. And it's the same thing where, like, if I want advice, I don't type it into Google anymore. I'd go to Reddit, because Reddit is going to give me a wall of text with people who have nothing to gain, but they want to share the knowledge. Whereas now if I click on an article for something, it's going to be, I'm going to scroll down, all these ads are going to load in and they're going to screw up what I'm looking at. There's going to be like 3 blurbs in the beginning to get you to look at all the ads. It's like if you look at a recipe on the internet now, you have to read some stupid story like, my husband loves zucchini, but he hates muffins. So I hid the muffins in the zucchini. Now my family loves me and I no longer consider suicide. And you're like, where is the recipe? So I guess my point was that like the internet has expanded in a way that gives you more niche, so you can find, it just takes more work. But like I couldn't even imagine clicking on like an IGN or GameSpot review of it. I can just hear the music blasting in my head and them sort of glossing over it. But like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just all marketing. That's what it's transitioned to. It's not necessarily whether, they've had moments where they'll rate stuff good or bad. I want to say, I think I was mentioning.
So this is a good 8 out of 10? This is a bad 8 out of 10.
Yeah. Well, there was like that FIFA game they released recently where it's like they literally just released the same games last year, but with like new assets.
Mm-hmm.
they just put like wiped over the teams and numbers, and to get everything just exactly how it should be. But it was still the same game. So I think it was IGN. They just like copied and pasted the review from last year, which I mean, that's like. There's occasional times where it's like they're going to make the right move, but otherwise, I just assume it's going to be mass marketing. Their aim is to try to sell something because they're going to try to scrape every little thing that they can. They don't exist to actually review games. They exist to make money.
Yep, and I talked to somebody who worked for a video game website, and he was there while they had huge growth till they became one of the top websites, for traffic. And he's like, oh, we only do reviews to just kind of keep our cred, but we're completely transitioning away from reviews because they're not cost effective. Somebody's got to play a game for 40 hours and then write a review for minimum 2 hours, to like properly edit it and actually put out a good review, the part that people are clicking on and wanting to look at. Whereas we could just talk about news. Like I saw the top story on N4G at one point today was news. It was like, this is confirmed. And then you're looking through all the comments and people are like, this was confirmed 8 months ago. You're just reconfirming something that was already confirmed. But it was something like, it had something to do with like Sony saying they're not going to have, you can't use an external USB drive at launch until they have like, I don't know, more approved partners that make the special SSD technology or whatever. But it kind of comes down to, it is all about money. And that's the weird thing with gaming in general is that, or most art, is that they have to make money. It is an entertainment art form. But I guess the wonderful thing about YouTube is when you find your favorites, it does feel like I found people that are doing this still for the love of it. Yeah, they're making money and they have to make a certain amount of money to be able to sustain and do it full time. But you can still find people that, like, you and I talk about Red Letter Media a lot, where you can tell, like you made the point today, you can tell that these guys are only doing it because they love it.
Yeah, they pick they'll pick stuff because they just want to talk about it. They don't pick it because they think it's going to get a lot of views. They're just doing it for the sake of the actual, video itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, it just in general, it's like, I mean, I know that, you hear, I mean, it's just the case of like, if we, as long as we have a world where we have to have money to live, to actually get along in life, then we're always going to run into this problem because you're going to have people. I mean, in a world let's say we had a world just hypothetically without money, right? If anybody's going to be doing art, they're going to be doing it because they want to do it. They don't necessarily. I mean, maybe they want like prestige. I don't know. But it just comes down to like, they're just going to want to do it because for the most part they just want to do it. And I mean, that's like the content that I want to see. But it's not always the content that will make money. And it's just the sad, truth of the world, right?
Well, that's sort of the dream of say, like Star Trek: The Next Generation. The universe that they posed was, what if there was a world where money didn't matter? You can go up to a machine and you can ask for whatever you want and it gives it to you. And what would be the best case scenario of that? It's kind of like, wait a sec, you guys sound like a bunch of commies. But but really, when you look at, like, if you compare our society to one, say, 100 years ago. So everyone's working, we're down in the mines and we're making all these things, and everyone's got to work 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day to provide what we need. And then all of a sudden you have the technology to do what 100 people could do before, or thousands of people could do before. And yet our quality of life sees an improvement. I mean, the life that we have compared to somebody 150 years ago doesn't work. I mean, it's obviously way better, right? We're going to live a lot longer. People aren't throwing feces and urine out the window. But you're kind of seeing like this rising tide raising all boats, but it feels like our quality of life gets increased a little bit and a little bit. And then what you're really seeing is that the top sort of 1% has ended up with vastly huge exponential growth.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and we also find our way to somehow, well, we just end up putting more stuff upon ourselves, even like after. It's like, if we free up our time, we'll just find other ways to make us use that time for like non-relaxation purposes, or, just slaving away at something, which, sometimes can be good if it's something you want to do. But if it's something you don't want to do and you just feel like you have to do it in order to live, then that kind of sucks, right? Yeah. Like if all of that benefit just gets consolidated into one person, then it's not any good motivation to actually have that benefit in the first place.
It's funny, we were talking a little bit about politics before we started, as in, like, let's just get all the politics out of our system before, and then we can talk about game stuff. And I've totally turned this into the Pinko commie show.
See, the funny thing is, like, because we were talking about Star Trek and how they have their system, it's like, I don't really know that I would call it necessarily like a communist kind of thing, because to me, it's just more of it's like they've reached a state of sustainability so that you can just eliminate certain aspects. It's like eliminating economics altogether almost. It's like they've automated it. They've just kind of put it in the back burner so that it's a generator. It just generates everything they need is already supplied. So it's kind of like, what point would economics even have in that context? It's like, it's not that it's gone from a capitalist to or communist or something. It's gone from anything to absolutely nothing and nothing at all.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could, if everything could be accounted for and everybody could sort of, I get what that would take is everybody to come together and agree that, okay, we can make enough and we can spread it all out. Whereas, like, do you want to have a little bit less peanut butter and it covers the entire piece of bread, or do you want to like have a couple bites of that bread or like load it up with everything you want on it?
I mean, it helps that Star Trek can literally like transform energy into matter.
It's the 24th century. Material needs no longer exist. We have eliminated hunger, want.
For the new systems, I saw that they got Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 are going to be boosted to 60 frames per second. Now, I remember streaming Sekiro at 60 FPS, but I looked it up and it said that it was never actually locked to 60. It was more like a 40 to 60, and now it's going to be ratcheted up there.
Variable frame rate.
Yeah, which can be really annoying. When I never noticed that so much as when I was playing Final Fantasy 15 and I had it on a Pro, and you could set it to two modes. It was either, do you want us to try to get to 60 and constantly fail, or do you want to lock it at 30? And I tried the 60, but there's just so much going on in that game that it was so drastic.
Optimistic mode and pessimistic mode.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just try to, it's like, do you want to just accept the things that you can't change? I put it on Serenity mode. Whereas Bloodborne is still going to be at 30. So I think that really paints the picture of there's going to be a remaster of Bloodborne. I don't know if there's already been an announcement for that, but I could see that.
It's got to be part of the engine's fault or something.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's just something they coded in there, like, because sometimes you'll have games where the actual mechanics, like sometimes the frame rate is like tied to the animations and the actual like gameplay. So if they change the frame rate, then everything else gets all screwed up.
Right. And that kind of, you get that feeling with, I'm sure, anything that has to do with coding. There's always that feeling of you move one bracket and the whole thing just kind of tumbles down. So that would make sense. Whereas, like, if Sekiro at some points could get to 60, it would make sense that you just add more power, you can get there. Whereas Bloodborne was never 60 and was always a 30 with some struggles. Although I found Bloodborne on the PS4 Pro on boost mode, for me, it tightened it up quite a bit. I'm not really like a frame rate aficionado. I didn't even really start caring about frame rates until probably more recently when I started seeing the difference with the PS4 Pro, and now it's like you really notice when things are not like a silky smooth 60 or even a locked 30. But Bloodborne never really bothered me. It wasn't, I mean, it's not like Dark Souls 1 and Blighttown and that kind of thing.
I remember it being fine too, just playing on a PS4, like the regular PS4, it was fine.
And
I do wonder though, like, when do you think they're gonna try to push it out? Like, do you think they're gonna, like, talking about a remastered Bloodborne, like, do you think they're gonna try to aim to get something like that out before Elden Ring?
Yes.
Do you think they probably? I guess they probably already have had some people working on that in their studio.
I would think they're gonna go. Demon Souls remake is gonna launch. Elden Ring is still a ways off. Bloodborne remaster will be the tie in between, because you can outsource a remaster. Unless you really have to get in there. Like, I haven't researched enough of what Bluepoint has done. Is Bluepoint able to... Well, Bluepoint did Demon Souls. So, yeah, I mean, you would think that if you could just take Bloodborne and somehow keep most of the guts there, but just
The assets are there.
yeah, keep all the assets and strip it down enough so that you can rebuild it 60. If you can make Bloodborne 4K 60, you can sell that probably for full price, and you can call that a remaster.
I think that's when you'd see it on PC release as well. Like, and if anything, that would probably be why it hasn't shown up yet.
Oh yeah, that makes total
rumors,
sense.
right? I mean, they had rumors of announcing that. So it just makes me wonder if they have this up their sleeve and they're just kind of like silently polishing that kind of thing in the back, just waiting, for a good time to actually make a little announcement.
Yeah, I think it's all about timing, because there's always kind of there's a little bit of a lack of launch stuff too, right? So you might as well spread that out. And also, Microsoft hasn't had anything threatening them at launch. So even though Sony's lost some of the things they were going to launch with, they don't really have any competition. Them having Demon Souls and whatever else they have is going to be enough for the launch. Whereas Xbox's main thing is, so I guess my point was that Sony can afford to spread that stuff out more and not have to pack the launch and make it more exciting. I was looking at a cool feature the new Xbox is going to have is it has like an auto HDR to enhance old games, where it uses some kind of algorithm to analyze what's on the screen and make basically most old games, probably at least from the Xbox One era, be auto HDR'd. And if the ACG Gamer guy said it looked pretty good for the most part. He said he was talking about how you can like filter all the games in the library too by all the different enhancements and the backwards compatibility, which is really nice. I think Xbox is handling this tiered, making more like a PCization of consoles. I think they're going to handle
Games
that
Pass.
really well.
Use that everywhere. I mean, I think that's going to work out pretty handily. I don't know that. I just wonder what console sales are going to be like. I wonder who's going to like sit there and say, yeah, Xbox is the one for me. I absolutely don't want the PlayStation 5. Because it seems to me like you get a lot of cross-platform games anyway. So
absolutely, cross-platform is huge, and now that way more stuff is going to PC, and PCs, those ports so far have been good. Every once in a while, it seems like the ports to PC are just terrible. Like, remember the era of Arkham City and ports that were so bad they were taken off of the Steam store? I think that's over, and PC's back to being really powerful. And even at the PS5 and Xbox Series X launch, when they're going to be the most powerful they're ever going to be, I think PC is still looking better, right? I mean, it just can't help but be better. So I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see the games spreading out more, and I think it's going to be good for everybody.
I feel like that has to be down to tooling, like all of the tooling that they have now, including Unreal Engine. I mean, that's got to be a boon to it.
Yeah, it's getting more ubiquitous, which is nice. And I think the games are always at their best when you can do that. Because, I mean, you see what CD Projekt Red is talking about with Cyberpunk when they go, sorry, we need another 21 days. And they kind of like passively drop like, yeah, it just takes a bit of time to optimize for the 4 different kinds of Xboxes there are, and PlayStations, and there's Stadia, and like NVIDIA GeForce and all this crap, and people using graphics cards that were handed to them by God and ones that are 4 years old. Like, that obviously takes a lot of work when you don't want to have, and because social media is so fast, if you put it out and you have a problem where it looks like shit on a Stadia, that image is going to be everywhere. Like when they put out the Halo trailer, I'm sure some people thought, this looks kind of wonky. Like, what do you think about this NPC? It looks kind of weird. Who's going to focus on that? Oh, everybody will. And that's all that trailer is going to be remembered for. Not trailer, but like the gameplay footage of it.
It's the first impression, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't want to make a mistake. And so much has been built into Cyberpunk being great, and there's so much goodwill that they have. I didn't realize, though, that they had announced the game back in 2012. Cyberpunk never came onto my radar until after The Witcher 3 had already been out. So I didn't realize
it's kind of same for me, too.
Yeah, but apparently since 2012, since before Witcher 3, it was announced at least, but we don't have to relitigate this whole thing, but it definitely does. It always comes down to just don't get people hyped. It's not worth the hype if for like the very likely fact that you're going to have delays and the negative reaction that's going to come with that.
You think Cyberpunk will make it out for December?
For December, well, December 10th is the one they have right now, right?
Yeah, it's like the 9th or the 10th or something.
Yeah,
think they're going to make that?
I would think so. I would think that. I don't. You know, the only thing that makes me doubt it is that they're very obviously trying to target a Christmas date. Whereas if you, because asking for 21 more days seems kind of silly. Seems like, wow, you had to write this big, heartfelt, yellow background letter again. You're now becoming kind of a joke and a meme of how often you say delays, because before this one they said we're not going to have any more. So if this was in the middle of the year and they just said, okay, we're going to put it out on by April 10th, I would think, oh, for sure. But because it's Christmas, I think they probably are selling themselves maybe a little bit shorter, because they go, they're trying to hit that number. They're trying to hit that date. So I would, oh man. But then on the other side of it, can they afford to delay one more time?
I feel like they're probably going to. I don't know why. I mean, it just seems like from what we've seen so far, I just wouldn't be surprised.
It's too bad, because
not that it matters to me. I mean, like, I don't really mind. I don't care so much. It's not, I'm an adult. I have a level of patience that I can use here.
But, and that's the thing I thought too, where is this just a lot of angry teenagers and kids that are like, I want it now, give it to me. You keep saying it's going to be, but actually the most people that are complaining that I read about is people that go, I booked time off work for this.
Oh, great.
And now I have a vacation with nothing to do. Or I'm going to play Assassin's Creed. But, man, and that's people's personal choice. But personally, I wouldn't want to blow through a game in friggin' 3 days. A game that, like, this is a game you've been looking forward to for some people since 2012. And you want to just inject it. You want to boil it down to crack and inject it into your veins or something. Or smoke it, I guess. Whereas, like, don't you just want to nibble on this thing and, like, try to spread it out? It's so good.
What I found funny overall is just this idea of, like, them saying, we've gone gold, right? They're like, and we're working on all this stuff, and you're going to have, like, some ridiculous, like, large download you're going to have to do on day one.
Oh, yeah.
And, man, I don't know. It's just that whole practice, like, the fact that you can change stuff and this is actually what the most recent escapist Civil War was about. It's like, can developers change their games after the fact? And they might have been, actually, I have a feeling that was probably recorded prior to the Cyberpunk thing. But yeah, it gets kind of ridiculous after a while.
So the argument was, should developers or publishers change their games after the fact?
Should they be allowed to kind of like should you be allowed to have things like kind of like live service games, I guess, where content can change or be removed? I think this was spurred by some kind of move that they made in Destiny or Destiny 2, where they're apparently removing a whole bunch of content for whatever reason. And like that's kind of obvious why someone would be upset by that, even if it was bad content, right? If it was really not fun to play. There's still people out there who are interested in, like, seeing the archival kind of archaeological aspect of it and just experiencing the game as it was at some period of time. And like, it gets to the point for me where I think it'd be best if we could just have, like, a little slider that would kind of move forward through time in between bug fixes. And it's probably hard as hell to actually implement in any real sense, but that would be like the dream. So you could just move the little slider to whatever point in time so you can see the game at whatever state you wanted it to be in. And even if it was not even for, like, bug fixes and stuff, but like for actual content. Like, say you had an area in the original version of the live service game, and then through the live service alterations they've made, because they have, like, a living world, right? Actually have something so you could go back and forward through time, because maybe one area gets changed radically to where it's unrecognizable and you can't experience it again the same way it was before. I like the idea of being able to archive content like that, and it's kind of it's a massive problem that's usually, I think, going to be left for developers' goodwill to actually figure out.
Yeah, because it comes down to obviously they're the ones paying to make it, and they're trying to do whatever it takes to sell it. And I'm sure that if there's enough demand of people wanting the ability to see the archive, because you're always going to have people, like it's like with game emulating. People say, we need to be able to preserve this stuff, and I agree. There's a lot of stuff. Like, I would be pissed if I could never go back and play the NES versions of Mario 1, 2, and 3. If the only ones that were available were the versions on the Super Nintendo, right? The Super Mario All-Stars. They're fine, they're nice, but I want to be able to see those. Maybe that's a nostalgia thing, maybe it's a feel thing.
Imagine even more so, like what you're saying is like, imagine they remake Mario 1, right?
Yeah.
And then that replaces the original one. You can't find it anymore for whatever reason.
Well, it's like the Star Wars movies. And now it's to the point where they like screwed up the masters of those, and they don't even have the easy ability of going back and releasing an original cut. Whereas, George Lucas has come and he's made changes that the vast majority of fans would say these are worse now from what you've done to them. And it takes these ridiculous fan projects where people have to go through and scrub every single frame to try to bring back what is gone. But yeah, I would be, and I'm happy to pay for that original version of Mario, but I would want it archived. And but that's what it comes down to, is like, you don't have a right to any of that stuff. I guess if you buy it, it degrades. But now you're coming up to this thing of like licensing, where we talked about on the last show, where Amazon says you don't even own the movies you buy off them. That word "buy" has a little asterisk by it. That's just a license you have until if they find a better way to make money with that license, it's not yours anymore.
Right. Yeah, and there's certainly a legal aspect to it, and then there's just like the philosophical kind of artistic aspect you get. And it's like when somebody dies, what do you do with the author's content? Are you allowed to change it after the original author dies? I mean, it's kind of weird. I think even like with Kingdoms of it's just something that made me think of it. Another example. I'm pretty sure you can't buy the original Kingdoms of Amalur right now. I think they, like the Re-Reckoning version, I think fully replaced it on Steam. I don't think GOG has it. GOG.
Wow.
But anyway, I just thought that was kind of funny, considering I own the original. Steam lets you maintain, a download access to that. You can still download games that you've bought in the past, but they won't let people buy it again. That may be primarily just due to publisher issues, monetary issues between THQ Nordic and whoever ends up acquiring content like that.
Yeah, if you ask somebody, should the Mona Lisa be preserved, or should we release a better version where she has eyebrows?
Reboot Mona Lisa.
Yeah, like give her big tits and give her eyebrows, because she doesn't even have eyebrows, and we'll just get rid of that old one, and you have to pay to see it. So you would think, well, that's obviously blasphemous, but when it comes to games, they're made by a corporation. They're made, it takes money to make them, and not a single person owns them. That's kind of what it comes down to. It's harder to empathize with the idea that you want to protect the original creator's vision of what they want, or the original person's experience with it, when it is just a corporation that has to do it and has to pay for. But it's like, but games they're not just candy. There's stuff that prompts a discussion and like what we're doing right now, and what so many people are doing out there on the internet and stuff. There is that attachment, and there's that kind of art form. But this seems to be something that always comes back when I'm talking with you, is that this idea of separating the money from the art, and like, what if you didn't need what if you didn't need to make a game be 40 hours long because you're going to guarantee a higher score Metacritic, and that's going to guarantee more money so that you can secure projects in the future? What if you could just make a really amazing game? Like, look at Inside. It took them 7 years to make Inside. It came out and it was amazing, and it's one of the best games I've ever played, and they probably would never want to go back and change anything on it. But that's not that's not the smartest move to make. Take 7 years to make one game that's only about 5 hours long. You're not going to get that approved by too many boards. But this is a small company that earned the right to do that with Limbo, and then put all of their eggs back into that basket and created something wonderful. But it's their personal choice to do it.
You know, going back to actually something you said earlier, it takes money and, you know, effort and time to make games. Honestly, it's kind of different even from, I mean, you know, maybe not so different from movies in a lot of ways, but I mean, more frequently than others, I'd say it takes a lot to preserve games and have them remain in a playable state. Like, for instance, okay, without emulating a NES game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, eventually that stuff's going to go bad. Like the circuit boards and the RAM and the memory in the game that stores the actual, you know, code. That's eventually these cartridges will end up going bad. I think they've actually experienced that in Atari games. There's a lot of Atari games that are kind of reaching that end of life in terms of like what the hardware can sustain, like cycling power on and off into the cartridge and everything. And like, you know, it's going to be hard to maintain the original copies of some of that kind of stuff. And then you get into like games that aren't necessarily physical, but just like, you know, even going on a computer, right? Sometimes it can be hard as hell, especially with Windows, to make sure that your game actually runs properly. Like, you have to have an emulation of like Windows 95 or something. Yeah. And then you have to deal with like the driver issues in order to actually get a game to a playable state. And it's just like the only other real way you can get around that is like taking the source code and just completely porting the game for an entirely updated, more modern platform to run the thing on. And that's not, you know, obviously that doesn't come free. Like there's going to be some cost involved with that. And to me, I mean, I know like there's differences in artwork and such for like, you know, restoring paintings and such, but I mean, you know, and as long as the thing is preserved in, you know, in a case or whatever they do to these things, it's gonna be good now as it will be in 100 years, I'm sure. And you know, it's just like games is just such a changing environment. And even like you said with film, it's like, I mean, you have your hard copies there. Like the only real case is if you like actually lose the original film or the original artwork. Like that's really the only instance in where you're going to be completely stricken from options in that situation.
Yeah, and so the only way that we can have control over that is you need to support things you like and help. You can vote with your dollar. Where if you, like we were saying, so if it takes money to make anything, then anytime you see these originals, you need to make sure you go out there and buy it and don't steal it. And we're emulating things a lot of the times to preserve them, and you sort of have like paid your kind of upfront costs of like, okay, I bought Mario Brothers 3 on a cartridge 20 years ago, so I guess you have the right to emulate that. But then you need to, I guess you need to kind of...
Legally, probably not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just sort of like a gray area that people have been using for a long time. So, like in that instance, every once in a while, you know, I'll see, okay, I'll throw money towards Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia a lot. Everybody does. And when I have money, I toss them some. And if there's an emulator I'm using a lot, I like to send a bit of money their way, because you need to support those things. You need to vote with your dollar. If like people pre-ordering stuff, you are just making them more likely to make pre-order stuff, whatever they put in their pre-orders. And then if that game has a lot of them, they're going to put more and more of that stuff in. Microtransactions are huge because as much as you can just if you're sitting in your gaming chair and you're thinking in like the ideal situation, what do you really want? I want like if you're the kind of person who wants an engrossing single player 40-hour game or whatever, 20 hours. But then when you really look at like the paperwork and the quarterly profits and stuff, and you look at what EA does when they put out a copy and pasted bullshit, no effort sports game, and the amount they make on microtransactions with their like hut mode and people playing online, it's ridiculous. That makes more than God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Mario combined. It laughs at those. And really, that we even have a AAA company making a AAA single player game that doesn't have that shit in it is actually like Mother Teresa bestowing charity. It's actually like almost a charity that they would not do that. They are so because it like the amount of money is like they make 100 times more. EA makes billions, I think, off of people buying virtual cards online, preying on their gambling instincts. Like really,
the dopamine.
Yeah, the dopamine, predatory. It's really evil stuff, and they make so much money off it. And I think you got to have some stones to not give into those demands and make every single game that, because if they are trying to make money, not having that stuff is actually a pretty damn sign of goodwill.
You know, at least some of those games, I guess, are playable long term. Like, you know, but the worst, I think the most fiendish aspect is when you have live service games where they're dependent upon an online resource being there. Not only do you have to be online in order to access it, that thing has to actually remain in existence pretty much forever. And under the assumption that these, you know, the developer, the publisher, whoever's hosting the thing, doesn't ever pull it offline. They don't ever end of life the game with literally no way to play it. I mean,
right.
Like, how would you, you know, if you played WoW, if you played World of Warcraft for an extensive amount of time, I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a different case for some MMOs, but I don't know, there's other games that are kind of similar, like I think Secret Worlds would be kind of one of them, where you can play through all the content and you can kind of do it all by yourself, but you have to have that online connection. And as soon as that dies down and you have no ability to recreate it and have you run your own server essentially, then you can't play the game anymore. You spent the money on it, but you don't get the game.
And it just comes down to money. So what those game companies, but is there enough demand? It's a supply and demand thing. Is there enough demand?
Doubt it.
Yeah, like are there people that want to play Vanilla WoW? But didn't that just happen? Like didn't Vanilla WoW get re-released or something? And it was a big event?
They actually they had like their WoW Classic. That was like a pretty hilarious version of that, because you have the I don't even know a lot of Blizzard staff names, but there's this one clip you can find on YouTube where this guy goes up on stage, and he's taking questions and answers from the audience, and one of the guys, somebody comes up and asks essentially, would you ever think of allowing players to replay like old content? And the guy on stage said something along the lines of like, you don't want that.
You think you do?
And then years later.
Right. But I'm wondering how many people hop onto that old classic, and once that initial rush of the dopamine
nostalgia,
and the familiarity, do you go, oh, this really isn't that great? I actually miss I miss a lot of the modern things in the new one. But it kind of comes down to, I guess it's that disconnect. Are these game publishers and developers going to get the message that people want to play or preserve the old stuff? And then are they going to put in the money and the risk in releasing that, seeing if it's out there? Because I think it is kind of a niche. Although then you see like all these mini SNESs, mini NESs. I see a lot of people on my Facebook that I've never heard mention video games get a classic NES, and I see them playing Mega Man and Contra and stuff, and I go, holy shit, you guys can play. Those games are hard. I've never heard you mention a video game once, and you're playing that.
You know, the funny thing is, though, like, in terms of the ability to actually set some of this stuff up, I mean, I wouldn't call it a Herculean task. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's definitely effort in order to provide, for example, server code. Like, I mean, this is the case with a lot of games now. Like, if I want to play TF2, I can grab the dedicated server code for TF2. If I want to do that for Left 4 Dead 2, I can do that as well. I can run my own server. Mm-hmm. Everything can kind of be self-hosted on my own. But there's other games that you simply can't do that, like Overwatch, right? I mean, they have it like pseudo behavior of that, where it's like you can create your own servers, but they're kind of created on their back end. So like they can't, you know, you're creating the server, but it's just instancing a server of their own, right, with like some custom rule set or whatever. And in reality, what I would love to see is just, I want to be able to run my own dedicated server. And the thing is, they have that code. That's what the dedicated server code is, what they're running. It's just not, I guess, polished enough or safe to release to customers, and so they just don't want us to have that. And like it's just easier to expose the smallest possible surface area for complaints to enter into their product. And so I mean that's just why it'll never happen. It's just like, you know, you've got services like AWS, Amazon's, you know, the cloud service platform. They can do stuff like that. Just have servers spin up and down, and it's going to have like this with this assumption that this thing will be able to exist forever. We'll always be able to have a service like this.
That's cool.
And I don't know. Maybe we'll run into a time down the line where maybe these things get more tightened down control, like more tightened down legislature over, you know, end of life processing and everything for games. But yeah, if EA's history is to say anything, I doubt it.
Yeah, it's what would be nice is if there was sort of like an expiry of who owns that kind of stuff, so that if after say 10 years or 15 years, like what would be cool is if after 10 years,
Nintendo would hate that.
Oh yeah, they would. Oh my God, they make no, they need that to last 50 years.
You can imagine their eyes like opening up wide, like oh my God, no.
But yeah, if they could have it where, okay, 10 years later, EA has no interest in this game that they made. And they're like, why would we want that? We've got this new version that's 12 versions newer. But if that code now becomes available, that source code, and then people can make whatever they want, and then the people who are going to dick around with a niche of it, maybe you have something where like they're not allowed to profit on it, and that can get kind of sticky. Or maybe they could, and then you would have, you know, But here's the thing. If they could, then you would see EA be like, what, you guys like that old one? We'll make a better one. We have like all the original code or whatever, and we'll release it. Now, something like that would be really, really, really nice, because then you would have, that would serve that small niche. If only like 50,000, 100,000 people are going to be interested in playing the vanilla version of whatever game, but you're allowed to have, and that overlaps with people who have the technical know-how to keep that stuff alive, that'd be really nice. And I think that...
But Blizzard went against that. They already like, they're like, with what happened with the remastered Warcraft, they basically said, no, any mods that are made, we own those. We don't want any more of this Dota 2 stuff happening. We don't want any of these mods turning into fully fledged games. We want to own it.
Wow. So they would rather stifle the creativity where somebody's mod that made Dota, that made League of Legends, that then makes Heroes of the Storm, and in probably in a way gets them more money. But see, that's the thing, is like Dota never would have happened if it wasn't for somebody messing around with it. And in turn, then they never would have had a Heroes of the Storm. And maybe they're pissed because I don't know what the numbers are like, but I've constantly seen League of Legends and Dota, you know, very popular, and it never seems like Heroes of the Storm is anywhere close to those games, so maybe they're a bit bitter about that, but that's kind of sad that they would stifle that creativity just so that they can control nothing, because nothing would have been made.
Yeah, it's you know, I can't fault a corporation for wanting to be greedy. I mean, the whole existence of corporation, but it's like, it just seems like an utter disrespect to like the whole, you know, ecosystem, or the whole like game culture.
It does, yeah, and they don't owe anything to them. They're trying to survive, and if for them they see that as sort of giving away. I guess it's the argument of like, if Dota becomes really, really popular, and it did, does that take away some of the pie from Blizzard, or does that grow the industry? Because I think you could say that Dota probably really helped Twitch and probably helped the esports scene, and overall probably has brought more money into gaming. I haven't looked at all the numbers of like what's the total amount people are spending on gaming, but I would think that that would be more of a cooperative way. But you understand, I guess they need to survive. They need to make money to survive so they can stay year after year. So it kind of becomes like a life or death thing with what they're gonna allow other people to do.
Yeah, it's kind of a vicious industry.
It is, and we've, you know, you see companies like THQ used to be a big deal. You know, THQ Nordic and Midway used to be at the top. And like very quickly, Sega was neck and neck with Super Nintendo, and then they plummeted real fast. And people still love the Dreamcast, but they were utter failures, right? And it's the Wii to the Wii U. It doesn't take long for you to, you can be the hero and then the villain or a laughingstock just a little bit later. Cyberpunk, everybody's favorite new game coming out, and then all of a sudden they got all this backlash, right? So you can see why they can be cutthroat with this stuff, and it is a business, and there's not a huge room for error.
Why not?
No. You been playing anything at all?
I've mostly been sticking with a little bit of Deep Rock Galactic. That's probably one of my favorite ones right now.
Dwarf mining co-op game?
Oh man, they and the developer behind the game, Ghost Ship. They're just, oh god, they're so good. Like they're kind of like that Stardew Valley sort of like honorable, like publishing updates after the fact, and you don't have to pay a damn thing for it.
Right, yeah.
It's great. And they just released one, and they added in entirely 2 different mission types, and just neat. It's like it's great. You have a company that's willing to like actually refresh a game, and it's an affordable price game. It's incredibly fun. They've done some of the best balancing in terms of like weapon mechanics, or just in general the way that dwarf classes play together. It's incredible. It's like I've most of the times I think of like Borderlands 3, where it's like you're gonna have this wacky state of power creep where things just go out of control, and then they're like struggling to balance things, and and admittedly there's a lot more complexity involved there with Borderlands 3, but maybe that's the heart of the issue. Like Deep Rock is just they came up with simple rules and they abstracted off of those, and
right.
It works very well.
Yeah, it's that idea of be very deep but simple, as opposed to sort of like needlessly complex and giving yourself a whole bunch of other problems. Like how cool Rocket League is when it's really not that tough. Like the amount of controls there are.
Conceptually, yeah.
It's like there's gas, brake, boost, and kind of like a shove over or whatever. And I mean, the things that people can do are even more impressive because you know that those controls are at hand. Anybody could potentially do them, as opposed to like a fighting game where you need to know a 12-foot combo or something, or a Marvel vs. Capcom game where there's like a 300 hit combo and all this stuff. Yeah, it's I've been playing, kind of been like bouncing between Link's Awakening, which I always really enjoy, and then the loop of it will kind of show itself where I can usually play that about 2 hours. Where
kind of like the age of the game kind of starts to show a little bit.
Yeah, where it's a lot of hack and whack. It's actually, there's like a surprising amount of enemies you deal with in that game compared to a modern game, when you realize like, oh yeah, this is the main part of the game, is running around whacking these guys. But they do, considering it's an old game and a lot of the bones are all very old, the pacing of it where you spend just long enough in a temple, they're so simplistic compared to the 3D temples, where okay, now I'm ready to get out of here. And there were 2 good challenges in the temple, and the puzzles are never really all that hard. The hardest thing in Zelda, I find, is that sometimes the solution to a room is to defeat all the enemies in the room, but you don't always have to defeat the enemies. So that can be, you just kind of
inconsistent.
Yeah. And then like the few times I've been stuck have been, oh, you just didn't take care of this enemy in a room. That's how you would have got a key or something. And then when I was done with the dungeon, there was a really good solid hour when I got out, and it was a lot of sort of above ground stuff. Because when you're always in the temples, it's sort of dark and claustrophobic. It's really nice to bounce around and sort of like talk to different characters and trade things around in the barter. So the pacing of it is really good. The look of it is good. The frame rate is really shockingly bad, especially mostly in the above ground stuff, because there's so much more going on the screen. But I've never played a first-party Nintendo game other than maybe, I don't know, some stuff on the N64 that was this bad. But it's a game I'll keep plugging away on.
That's sad.
Yeah. I had heard a rumor that maybe it was supposed to be for the Switch Pro, and then that never came out.
Right.
That would make sense. It kind of feels like you're trying to run a new 3DS game on an old 3DS.
It's funny, Link's Awakening was actually, like, I went, so when I had an NES, and I had the original Legend of Zelda, and I had an SNES, but I never got the actual Legend of Zelda for SNES.
Right, Link to the Past.
And I went straight to Link's Awakening. That was actually the one and that's, and you know, they're kind of close enough, I think, when you compare Link's Awakening and SNES Legend of Zelda, they're similar, you know.
Oh yeah, they're definitely. I think like Link to the Past for SNES came out first, and then they figured out how can we kind of have the tech of the NES version, but then all the stuff you get in the SNES version, and they, I mean, that was a real killer app for the Game Boy, and then the Game Boy Color.
Yep, and I loved that game. It was great.
And all the Mario characters in there, Goombas. And,
that was so funny.
Yeah, it's got a good sense
like
of humor.
Yoshi doll.
Yeah, I don't know if they've changed any of the dialogue, but I find this one like oddly sexual. There's all these. There's like a woman you meet, and her room is very sort of like red and sensual looking, and there's like soft pillows. It really looks like a whorehouse. And she gives you a special rub down and stuff for money, and that she gives to other guys for money. It's really strange to see in a game in 2020 that is marketed towards like a family-friendly experience. It's kind of like all the stuff that the South Park creators would put in their movie, and then the censors can only catch so many things.
That's the thing. Those are the kind of things I probably missed when I originally played it.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't have been like, oh cool, I like lotion. My mom rubbed sunscreen on me. Yay. But it's really, noticeable when you play now. There. Yeah. And then I've been playing Star Wars Squadrons, which I'm stuck on the last mission. It's really difficult. That game does so many things well. Like on paper, if you were saying, okay, team, how are you going to make a modern TIE fighter? And they did everything right. They went back and they did probably most things right. They obviously went back and looked at what made the original games good. Because the missions are really similar. In fact, they improve upon sort of the variety of missions and more like set pieces in the missions. So that's kind of the nice modern aspect to it. The like controlling the lasers and the engines and the shields was a big thing in the original games, and they've actually introduced that. But they've kept that, but introduced new elements like supercharging some of them at some point. So there's even more micromanagement with that. They kind of bring in a bit more co-pilot personality, like Wing Commander had back then, which you didn't have any of that in the original. What they're lacking, though, is like a bit more flavor in the world and a bit more character, I think the original one was written a lot better, where you would start off policing a civil war, and you could kind of see a lot about like, okay, these people use out-of-date fighters in the first couple of missions, because that's what they can afford. And there was like more of a story between the different ship types and stuff that was like a lore builder. Whereas this one is a bit more Saturday morning cartoon. There's also a lot of like, and I'm all for diversity, but there's so much that it's incredibly noticeable. It's written by Mitch Dyer, who used to be a reviewer for GameSpot or IGN, and he came out and he's like, what he's saying? I don't know if he came out, but he said like one of the people in the game is their pronoun is them, and that's cool to see all that stuff, but there's so much of it. I guess, but then I always think, well, if I was a girl or a trans person growing up playing games, I probably would feel like, man, there sure are a lot of white guys in all of these games. Who are the heroes and who are the villains and all that stuff. So,
I just figure if they don't draw attention to it, like in a way that feels like unnatural, then it's not a problem. If it starts feeling like unnatural, and it's like, who's the judge of that, right? That's the hard part. But as soon as it starts to feel like it's like being unnaturally brought up, like in a way where it's like they're trying to rub it in your face, like that starts to feel a little bit off. And I don't even know if I have any good examples of something like that, honestly. But that would be like my litmus test if it were me. It's like, if they make me feel like it's being brought up more than like, like anybody would naturally bring up in any given conversation, then that kind of starts to feel a little weird.
Right.
But maybe not. I don't know. It's definitely a touchy subject when it comes to that too, because you don't want it to rub anyone in the wrong way, and you definitely don't want anyone to feel bad for any particular thing like that. But
sure.
So it's like, it's hard. You can't, and we're not in any right to say like you should have done this or not or that or whatever. But
no, and
I get where you're coming from.
No, and I would say it's more that I just noticed it, and I would say that they don't really make a point of that at all. Like none of the story has to do with anyone's gender or preferred pronoun at all. It's all just sort of accepted, like, this is how we all are, and they really don't make a point of it at all. It's more just something I noticed, and I think is a good thing, and I'm more just kind of commenting on how I notice it. What I would say is, like, the writing is really strong when he's handling the Imperial stuff. There's a good couple of missions where you see the infighting among the sort of like smaller Imperials, like who controls what region, and actually at one point, this is kind of a minor spoiler, where your Imperial team goes into another Imperial space to get help, and that leader of that Imperial group says, actually, I'm in control of this area, and now that you're here, we're going to commandeer your ship, and you're going to be doing work for us. And then that kind of spirals into sort of, because like now that the Emperor's gone, that is what the Imperials would do, right? Like they're all about power and control and kind of the bureaucracy, and you get it's a really fun diversion. And then what I won't spoil is that it ends up kind of turning into this like really clever and creative mission of like, how are we going to kind of use this to our advantage? And that stuff is done really well. The overall arc is pretty solid. I find the Rebel stuff is really cheesy. That's where it feels like Saturday morning cartoon of kind of.
I was going to say, like, you're talking about like the it sounds more grounded for the Imperial side of things.
Very, yeah. The Imperials are grounded and cleverly done, and then the Rebels are more. They're the ones that just feel kind of flat and rah.
Epic, like they're trying to do like epic climax, like they're setting it up for like some kind of you're the hero kind of moment, sort of thing.
Oh, there's a lot of that, and that's something I notice as I get older. Is it can be really annoying when you go into a game and people look at you and they're like, "You're the greatest! Oh my God, everything is so much better since you've come along!" Like, "Oh, hail the Dragonborn!" And you feel like it's really over the top because sometimes that works. But you're not. You kind of want to blend in a bit more, and it can just feel like really, what do you call it? Like condescending and pandering when that happens.
Yeah, like overly contrived sometimes. Like I know, it's like I kind of want to have more games that have like a complexity kind of that you'd associate with real life. I want to feel like there's something I can tie back to like things that have actually happened in history in our world, you know, and. The way, and especially if it is about people. I mean, they've never established that it's like the Earth. Well, I don't know. Maybe Earth isn't in Star Wars. I'm not sure.
That's always been the thing where it's supposed to be not Earth.
Yeah.
And it's it's in a galaxy far, far away. And what I found weird about the newer Star Wars is that they kind of forget that, and some of the people talk like they're from here, and they make these really weird metaphors and similes that are, well, they're not weird. They're something like an Earth. Something that would only exist on Earth. Like,
if they said frisbee, I would be mad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when they talk about like snakes or something, do you have snakes? Do you have spiders? You're not supposed to have that stuff. And why are you using this? That stuff just kind of slips through, and I think they're not thinking about it. Sort of like Data on Star Trek, where he's supposed to never use a contraction. He's supposed to always say cannot instead of can't, but actually. People that have watched it be like, well, he actually slips up quite a bit. They just don't notice it, right? Because they're making a TV show fast.
Yeah, it's hard to maintain that kind of thing in any kind of, fantastical work. I mean, it's something I've devoted a lot of time to thinking about. When it's just like, how can you get around with that? Like, are you going to make up your entirely new language? Are you going to treat it as if we're getting like a translation? I mean, how do you even handle that? Like, you're going to recreate the entire history of essentially a civilization.
Yeah.
I mean,
but not have it be
we
overwhelming.
can do that much.
Yeah, not like overwhelm the person with endless pages of lore right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
Because when
I'm not reading that much for that.
No, and just like you want to. Star Wars was great because it always hinted at that stuff, and they didn't hit you over the head with it, and they didn't start off. They kind of started off with the action, made you care about the characters, and then they would hint at everything around it. And that was the fun, curious part, and the mystery is if you just being like, oh, well, I wonder what those people are doing. Oh, they must have something to do with that. And then you realize in the prequels that when you over-explain everything, it's awful. So, and also there's some liberties of, well, they are speaking English. Obviously, they'd be speaking a different language if they were in a galaxy far, far away. So,
what do they call it? Like
basic is what they call it.
Galactic or something. Galactic Standard, I think.
Basic.
I think they refer to it as Galactic Standard or something.
Basic, they call it basic.
Basic? Oh my God.
Yeah. So in a way, if they do use a metaphor that is something that we would say, you can think, I guess, okay, well, the show is translating their language into ours, so, but I would prefer that they not. I prefer that they'd use their own, and that's just another way to like have more flavor and be more creative.
Yeah, just no pop culture references. Like, that's the only thing. That's the worst. Like, if it's pop culture, if it's like something from music or a famous quote or like a saying that sort of has emerged from just that's the stuff that's most jarring to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it was when Finn in The Force Awakens, he sort of like blows something up, and he said something like, "Did you see that? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about." Go, this doesn't feel like Star Wars. Maybe, I don't know if I'm just being really white, and I go, oh, that's not how all the like English actors in 1970s Star Wars talked. But to me, it felt very, I don't know, it felt too colloquial to our time.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I mean, you gotta have. They would have their own kind of unique phrases, presumably. They'd have their own. They might not be saying the word "cool." They might say something else. They'd have. I mean, we've seen that within our own generations. Like, I mean, in my own lifetime, I've seen new words enter the lexicon.
Sure.
And it's just like, I would expect the same thing of them. But sometimes, like, I feel like I've also seen that happen in games where they actually do introduce their new words, but then they like overuse it to the point where it becomes almost worse than if they had just used something from our own world.
Yeah, I think that you want to find a balance. I mean, when you think of Leia calling Han, she calls him like a scruffy looking nerf herder, where the half of that is really relatable. You can be scruffy, and then nerf herder. You know what herding is. You don't know what a nerf is, but you know that nerf is something small, so it makes sense. Like, there's a way of that's done really, really well. But yeah, if they start calling, what do they call them, like laser brain, but even that's still a way of doing it where you have one foot very firmly planted in what people can understand, unless they call them like, oh, you're nothing but a nip squalling flag grabber. But not even, see there, even my brain couldn't come up with a fourth word that was unique. I had to go to grabber.
Actually, it's like this. Now that I think about it, it does make me think of there's in the Expanse. So you're familiar with the Expanse? It's a book series originally turned into a sci-fi, then Amazon Prime series.
Okay.
And I remember they have one particular phrase they utter all the time in the show, but I don't recall ever seeing it at all in the books. And that, I mean, it's probably, maybe it's there, but I don't remember it in the same way. They say Belta Loda. It's like this like Belter Creole, these people who live in space, and they have like their own sort of like their own like vernacular. Like it's and they utter that all the time. It's like they'll probably make sure to put that in like the first episode of every season on the show.
Okay.
But it's like one of those things where it's like it's unique to the show, and it's like, and then some people really, really like it. But then I'll hear it, and I'm like, whatever. I mean, I don't know. It just reminds me of the separation that I'm not watching the book,
Well, I think that kind of breaks the rule of having two words, right? Where it's when I think of Red Dwarf, and I think of them calling somebody a smeghead, whereas you can just think of that as 4-letter word and then had like smeg off or just saying smeg, and even smeg sounds like something you would describe as like a slimy sort of gross smegma or whatever, right? So I think that's done really well. But when you have Belta Loader or Belta Loda, there's like nothing for your brain to really grab onto, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me it does sound reasonable. Like when I hear some of the other stuff they've done, like they interpreted the idea of having like this amalgam of all these different accents and how they would evolve in space. I felt like it kind of works to me. It's just sort of, honestly, I don't even know if it should make sense.
Right.
That I think that's the whole point. It has the sound super foreign, like to the point where I couldn't even latch onto it. It's just the amount of like frequency of it being used almost as like a catchphrase or a tagline, as opposed to just simply naturally occurring in conversation.
I see.
It's more like it's like clearly this is the clip they meant to show in previews. You know what I mean?
Right, just to like something that's gonna click in for the people that are the iconic. So the fans of the book will be like, I know that. Okay, I like that. And okay, so it's more like a branding thing as opposed to
except it's all internal
organic.
to the show. It's not even in the book as far as I remember. Like it's probably there, but I don't ever remember like seeing that and having it stick in my mind so much. And maybe it's just the fact that it's being said. I don't know.
We'll see how that. Because from what I remember from Dune, there's going to be a lot of terminology and lore from that. So it'll be really interesting how they. Because the thing with the Dune books, from what I've read of one of them, maybe I got like quarter of the way through. There's it's mostly internal dialogue, right? Or internal monologue. It's a lot of thinking. And the David Lynch version had a lot of voiceover and stuff to try to get around that, but I find that doesn't work. So it'll be interesting how they. I mean, you can do it with narration and kind of like sweeping shots and like montagey stuff. I think that when you zoom in on someone's face and have this sort of slightly reverbed internal voice, it sounds awful. Yeah. But so we'll see how they handle it. I mean, this director has been Denis Villeneuve. He's done such a great job with The Arrival, Sicario, Blade Runner. The guy knows how to create a slow-moving sci-fi. And I think Dune is such a. I'm so excited for it. That one was pushed back, I think, right? Dune.
Was it? I thought it was still in December. I don't know.
No, I think it was pushed back, which I'm fine with. I'm happy to wait. I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing is, I never connected the Fatboy Slim song "Weapon of Choice" as having a Dune reference.
No, I didn't either.
Walk without rhythm, and you won't attract the worm.
Oh my God! All right, well that's gonna be it. Thanks, Horky.
No problem.